Government gets absolutely roasted for dodging questions like it's a game of parliamentary dodgeball. Right, so imagine you're back in school, yeah? And the teacher asks you a direct question about your homework, and instead of answering, you start waffling on about what you had for breakfast, your dog's veterinary appointments, and the philosophical implications of cloud formations. That teacher would absolutely lose it, wouldn't they? Well, that's essentially what's been happening in the House of Commons, except the teacher is Sir Lindsay Hoyle, and he is not having it anymore. Before we dive into this beautiful parliamentary carnage, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because British politics is serving up drama hotter than a Greggs sausage roll fresh out the oven, and you don't want to miss a single scalding minute of it. So, here's the tea. Government ministers have been getting absolutely hammered by the Commons Speaker for what can only be described as Olympic-level question dodging. We're talking evasion so spectacular it deserves its own Netflix documentary. Sir Lindsay Hoyle has had to stand up multiple times and basically give grown adults in positions of enormous power the equivalent of a detention for not doing their homework properly. And honestly, it's been glorious to watch. Now, let's set the scene properly, because this isn't just a one-off situation. This has been building like a pressure cooker in a student flat that nobody knows how to operate. Parliamentary convention dictates that when MPs ask ministers questions during debates and question times, those ministers are supposed to actually, answer them. Revolutionary concept, I know. But increasingly, what we've been seeing is ministers treating parliamentary questions like they're dodging their ex at Tesco, desperately trying to escape down a different aisle while pretending they haven't seen them. The Speaker of the House, for those who aren't familiar, is basically the referee of parliamentary proceedings. Sir Lindsay Hoyle has been in the role since 2019, and his job is to maintain order, ensure rules are followed, and make sure that democracy actually functions the way it's supposed to. Recently, he's had to work overtime because ministers have been treating parliamentary accountability like an optional DLC that they simply chose not to purchase. Here's where it gets properly juicy. During various sessions, Hoyle has had to intervene repeatedly, essentially telling ministers off in front of everyone, like they're naughty school children who've been caught passing notes in class. And we're not talking gentle reminders here. We're talking full-blown public dressings down that would make your nan's disappointed face look positively cheerful by comparison. The pattern goes something like this. An MP stands up, asks a specific question about policy, spending, or government actions. Simple enough, right? But instead of getting a straight answer, they get what can only be described as verbal gymnastics of the highest order. Ministers will start talking about something tangentially related, mention statistics from 3 years ago, throw in some party political points, have a little dig at the opposition, maybe reference something completely irrelevant, and then sit down looking rather pleased with themselves. Meanwhile, the original question remains floating in the chamber like a ghost that nobody wants to acknowledge at the parliamentary séance. And Hoyle, he's been having absolutely none of it. He's intervened to remind ministers that their job, their literal democratic function, is to answer the questions they're being asked. Not the questions they wish they were being asked, not the questions that would make them look good, the actual questions being posed by elected representatives who are trying to hold the government to account.
What makes this particularly spicy is that this isn't about party politics. Hoyle has form for being scrupulously impartial. He has to be. It's literally his job. When he's calling out government ministers for evasion, he's not doing it because he supports the opposition or has a personal vendetta. He's doing it because the fundamental machinery of democratic accountability is starting to sound like a car engine that's been filled with custard instead of oil, and someone needs to call a mechanic before the whole thing explodes. Think about what parliamentary questions are actually for. They're not just political theatre, though they can certainly be entertaining. They're a crucial mechanism by which the executive branch, the government, is held accountable by the legislative branch, Parliament. When ministers dodge questions, they're not just being annoying, they're actively undermining one of the core principles of parliamentary democracy. No pressure or anything, but it's quite literally how we ensure those in power aren't just doing whatever they fancy without scrutiny. The frustration from MPs across the chamber has been palpable. You can almost feel the collective eye-rolling through the parliamentary broadcast feed. Opposition MPs are obviously going to be frustrated when they can't get straight answers. That's standard fare. But backbenchers from the government's own side have also been visibly exasperated when ministers dodge questions that actually matter to their constituents. Because here's the thing, when an MP asks about funding for their local hospital or support for businesses in their constituency, and the minister responds with a pre-prepared speech about how wonderful the government is, generally, that MP still has to go back to their constituents empty-handed. Hoyle's interventions have ranged from polite but firm reminders to what can only be described as barely concealed parliamentary fury. He's pointed out that ministers need to address the questions directly. He's emphasized that yes or no questions deserve yes or no answers, not 5-minute dissertations on everything except the actual answer. He's reminded them that their responsibility is to Parliament, not to their media teams or party spin doctors. What's particularly brilliant about all this is watching the dynamic play out in real time. A minister will finish their non-answer, looking quite confident. Then Hoyle will interject, politely but unmistakably making it clear that the question hasn't actually been answered. The minister will do that thing where they shuffle their papers and suddenly become very interested in the ceiling architecture. And occasionally they'll have to stand up and have another go, this time actually addressing what they were asked. It's like watching someone reluctantly admitting they did, in fact, eat the last biscuit after claiming they hadn't seen it. The broader implications here are actually quite serious, beneath all the entertaining parliamentary theatre. If ministers can consistently avoid answering difficult questions without consequences, then parliamentary scrutiny becomes meaningless. It transforms Prime Minister's questions, departmental questions, and debates into elaborate performance art where everyone knows their lines, but nobody's actually communicating. That might be fine for avant-garde theatre, but it's absolutely terrible for democracy. Some might argue that politicians have always been evasive, that this is nothing new, and sure, political evasion is older than Parliament itself, but there's a difference between artfully pivoting from a difficult question while still providing some substantive information and completely ignoring the question to deliver pre-packaged talking points that could have been written by an AI that was only trained on party press releases. The latter is what's been increasingly happening, and it's what's finally provoked serious intervention from the Speaker. It's also worth noting that this behavior doesn't actually help the government in the long run. Sure, dodging a difficult question might save embarrassment in the immediate moment, but it creates a narrative of evasion and lack of transparency that undermines public trust. People aren't stupid. When they see ministers repeatedly refusing to give straight answers, they don't think, oh, there must be a very good reason for that complexity. They think, what are they hiding? Trust in politics is already lower than a limbo stick at a parliamentary summer party, and this kind of behavior just digs that hole deeper. The fact that the Speaker has had to intervene multiple times suggests this isn't just going to resolve itself with a quiet word behind the scenes. This is now a pattern that's been publicly called out, which means ministers are on notice. The next time they stand up to answer questions, they know that everyone's watching to see whether they'll actually address what they've been asked, or whether they'll try their luck at dodging again and risk another public telling off. So, what happens next? Well, that's the million-pound question that, ironically, a government minister would probably refuse to answer directly. But the Speaker has made his position crystal clear. Answer the questions properly or expect to be called out in front of everyone. It's accountability in action, and while it might make for uncomfortable viewing for those on the receiving end, it's exactly what parliamentary democracy needs. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, democracy works best when questions get answers.